here's what's coming up on the world today. The White House says President Biden will be sending about 2,000 troops to Europe this week, just as President Vladimir Putin accuses the US and NATO of trying to draw Russia into war. Many feared death following the coup attempt in Guinea-Bissau. Plus, there's no keeping Boris Johnson down. The British Prime Minister says he will get on with the job of governing, despite an impending letter of no confidence on its leadership. A warm welcome to the programme. I'm Teniola Shoboale here in Lagos, Nigeria. We begin with the US, where President Joe Biden is said to be sending about 2,000 troops to Europe this week amid fears of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. White House officials say the troops will be sent from Fort Bragg to Poland and Germany, and a further 1,000 already in Germany will go to Romania. The White House says the troops are not going to fight in Ukraine and their move is not permanent. They will only respond to current conditions. President Biden had said on Friday he planned to move U.S. troops to Eastern Europe and NATO countries in the near term. He, however, did not elaborate on the exact timing and did not specify the exact number, saying that it would not be a lot. Well, the announcement by the White House comes hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin accused the US and NATO of trying to draw Russia into a war in Ukraine. He was speaking after talks with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán in Moscow. Mr. Putin said, "It seems to me that the United States is not so much concerned about the security of Ukraine, but its main talks is to contain Russia's development. In this sense, Ukraine itself is just a tool to reach his goal," as according to the Russian president. He also said the U.S. had ignored Moscow's concerns in its response to Russia's demands for legally binding security guarantees, including a block on the NATO alliance's further expansion to the east. He suggested that if Ukraine were granted its wish to join NATO, it could drag the other members into a war with Russia. In recent weeks, Russia has moved about 100,000 troops equipped with everything from tanks and ammunition and air power to Ukraine's border, yet it denies planning to invade Ukraine. Well, our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now for more on the latest developments. Maria, help us understand this. U.S. allies in Europe already say they have no plans to send combat troops to Ukraine, but the United States is boosting U.S. troop presence in Europe, saying they will not be going into Ukraine, which it accuses Russia, which has massed about 100,000 troops near the Ukraine border, and denies it's planning to invade Ukraine. Do you see the similarities here?
There is a couple of pieces, I think, that we have to recognize that are occurring here. We know that President Biden has been very forthright, and you know, the Secretary of State has even gone in to discuss whether or not it's with Ukraine or Russia on this issue. And so this has been something that has been brewing for, you know, many weeks now. This is nothing new, and I think we could expect that the U.S. was going to kind of lead the way. And as you said, other European allies are saying they're not coming in, but the U.S. is definitely taking a stand to show their leadership. And I think the U.S. feels as though they have lost much of their footing over the last few years as it relates to their relationships in Europe and their leadership role. And so this is President Biden's chance to show the U.S. as a leader and to take the first steps. And I think that's really what this is about. This is about the U.S. being on the forefront of what they believe is an issue, and ensuring that it is addressed and ensuring that they're not coming in reactive mode, but they're being proactive.
You know, usually all the warmongering happens with Republican leaders in the U.S., and it's believed to be a distraction from domestic issues. Leaders have used wars or war rhetoric to drum up support and raise ratings back home. Which do you think is the case in the case of President Biden?
Well, we know that President Biden has been very clear since the beginning of his administration that he was going to come in and try to address foreign relations. We know in year one he was not able to make as much headway as I think was expected. And now we are entering year two. And I think he is going to be even more present overseas. And a lot of this was obviously due to COVID, due to some of the economic challenges. And there were a host of domestic challenges that the president had to address in year one. And so now where his background is. I mean, he ran on the fact that as a senator in the Obama administration, he was the lead in many foreign relation issues and the lead in many foreign relation meetings and delegations. And so I think as president, he is trying to reaffirm that and show that that is his area of strength. And so we're going to see that he is definitely going to try his best to be the leader and the first one to come out and to be a leader within NATO. We know that many of the challenges that existed as it relates to the U.S. and foreign relations in the previous administration, not only challenges, but many Americans felt that we were not as strong of a presence internationally as we had been in years past.
And I want to speak about those comments from the Russian president. How is President Biden reacting to the accusation that the U.S. and NATO are pushing Russia into a war?
You know, I think the U.S. is going to continue to say they are not trying to move forward with war. That is not their intention. But I think they're going to continue to have a very strong stance. We know that some of the allegations and some of the communication between the U.S. and Russia in the last administration was very concerning to many Americans. And I think this administration is probably putting forth more effort than the average administration would, or in years past we would see emphasis on Russia due to trying to dispel the relationships between the U.S. and Russia and any signs of corruption that existed. And so that is really where President Biden is. So there's probably an enormous amount of emphasis than we would typically see within a normal presidential administration on Russia.
All right then, Maria, thanks a lot for the update. Well, there's still more from the Kremlin today as nations prepare sanctions against the government. Moscow says Russia has plans to hedge against possible U.S. sanctions and to minimize their consequences, calling on the White House to stop whipping up tensions in Europe. Washington and NATO have so far refused to give Moscow guarantees. It's seeking that the Western military alliance will stop expanding and won't deploy offensive weapons to Ukraine. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov describes Washington's behavior as unpredictable. Meanwhile, the Dutch Prime Minister is also calling for dialogue to diffuse the tensions with Russia. He's the latest leader following the tracks of the British and Polish Prime Ministers to visit Kyiv in a show of solidarity after Russia massed tens of thousands of troops near Ukraine's borders.
Last week, a new step was taken at the European Court of Ukraine. President Zelensky and I, we agree that every effort must now be made to de-escalate the dangerous situation in which we find ourselves. And we believe that the only route to a solution is through de-escalation, diplomacy and dialogue. It is essential for dialogue to continue between Russia and the United States, between Russia and NATO, and of course between the countries of the Normandy 4, Ukraine, Russia, Germany and France. Work is already underway in Europe and in partnership with the US to prepare a robust package of sanctions. The Netherlands will in the meantime support Ukraine wherever we can. For example, we are talking about offering Dutch assistance to fend off cyber attacks against Ukraine. President Zelensky and I took time to reflect on the disaster. 298 people died on the 17th of July 2014. The Netherlands' priorities are establishing the truth, achieving justice, and holding those responsible to account. And that's not going to change. It's not an easy process, but giving up is not an option for both of us.
And away from Ukraine to other present stories, President Muhammadu Buhari has joined other West African leaders in condemning the attempted coup in Guinea-Bissau. In a press release by spokesperson Stafemi Adesina, President Buhari congratulated his Guinea-Bissau counterpart on surviving the attempt. He also commended the loyal troops in Guinea-Bissau for the show of patriotism leading to their spectacular victory over the disloyal elements of the military. President Buhari spoke to President Umaru Embalo shortly after the coup attempt, telling him he looked forward to working with him to strengthen existing bilateral ties between these sisterly nations. Meanwhile, President Embalo says he survived the 5-hour attempted coup after being under heavy gunfire. He said the attackers tried to kill him and his entire cabinet at the government palace, and that many others had been killed in the fighting on both sides. The attackers were linked to drug trafficking in the country, and that the situation is now under control. Well, the attempted coup in Guinea-Bissau could be a clear sign that an era once dreaded could be making a comeback. African regional and continental blocs have for years harped on the importance and advantages of democratic governance. But for countries that have experienced coups over the last 3 years, any semblance of democratic governance is hanging by a thread.
Although it was not successful, Guinea-Bissau attempted coup was not surprising anymore, especially because over the past 2 years there have been military takeovers in Mali, Chad, Burkina Faso and Guinea, as well as further east in Sudan. It seems forceful power grabs are coming back in West and Central Africa, and this is worrying to analysts who fear the democratic gains made in the region are being undermined. As events in Guinea-Bissau unfolded on Tuesday, the regional bloc ECOWAS condemned the actions, as it has done in the past, imposing sanctions and suspensions. ECOWAS issued sanctions against Mali and Burkina Faso, but they haven't stopped the wave of coups in the region. Guinea-Bissau has also been subjected to sanctions over the last decade. After the coup in Burkina Faso, the regional economic bloc ECOWAS released a statement saying that such a move cannot be tolerated and instructing the soldiers to return to their barracks, but it was not clear what ECOWAS could do, given its record mediating in Mali. But are these measures really effective? One ironic thing about these recent coups have been the cheering of soldiers by citizens. In Burkina Faso and Mali, we saw the junta's actions being welcomed with joy from some parts of the population. Burkina Faso, the latest successful coup in West Africa, has had the most successful coups with 8 takeovers and only 1 failed coup. There were 4 successful coups in Africa in 2021. There hadn't been that many in a single calendar year since 1999. Putting in context, more than 114 million people are now being ruled by soldiers who have illegally seized power.
We'll return in just a moment. We'll have more on the military takeovers across the continent. Plus, well, if you haven't noticed, today's date is 2/2/2022. A pretty auspicious day for some and a perfect wedding date for a German couple. We'll have their story after the break. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Now for the wave of military coups sweeping across the continent, we have joining us former Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi, joins us now on the program. Thank you so much for your time on The World Today, sir. Keshi joins us now on the program. The World Today, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, sir. What did you make of the attempted?
Thank you for having me.
All right, sir. Just lucky.
Now we hear of either coup attempts or successful coup d'etat in a number of countries.
All right, Ambassador Keshi, it seems the feedback from your TV, we do advise you to mute your TV set so we can go on with the discussion. We will come back to that. But in the meantime, let's take a look at some other stories. Police in the Democratic Republic of Congo capital Kinshasa say at least 26 people have died after they were electrocuted by a fallen power cable at a market. The high voltage cable had snapped and fell onto houses and people shopping. Unverified footage posted to social media appeared to show the aftermath of the incident, with several motionless bodies in puddles of water. It's not yet clear what caused the power cable to break, but in a statement, DR Congo's national electricity company said it believed lightning had struck part of the cable, causing it to fall to the ground. The company sent condolences to the victims' families. All right, here we have Ambassador Joe Keshi with us now. Sir, I hope we're good to go on with the discussion now. Before the interruption, you were talking to us about what you make of the attempted coup in Guinea-Bissau.
I think it's worrisome. I think it's worrisome that every other month we hear of one incident of coup or successful coup d'etat or attempts being made by some military to take over the administration of some countries. It's most unfortunate, and I'm glad that ECOWAS leaders and AU and the rest of the world has condemned this growing trend of the military to want to, dissolve the democratic process, particularly on the west coast of Africa.
Well, let's talk about how to stop the trend. The military leaders always allude to corruption, insecurity, mismanagement of funds, the gap between the rich and the poor, even uneven distribution of resources. They provide breeding ground for coups, but they are toppling civilian governments. Are the democratically elected leaders to blame for the action of the military in any way?
No, it would be totally wrong. It would be totally wrong to blame democratic leaders to some extent. While we can hold them responsible today because they are the ones on the seat, the truth of the matter is that if you look at all the countries that are experiencing coup d'etat today, the military has ruled for most part in the history of these countries. And so some of the problems that the same military is condemning or giving us an excuse for their actions, the military itself, past military leaders are responsible for some of these problems. And of course, yes, it's true that the civilian democratically elected governments, they not move fast enough to begin to address these problems. So the breeding ground for coups, are always there since anybody can think of, but we must continuously find a way to resolve and to stop the military from doing what they are doing now.
Looking forward, while we don't want to predict any more potential coups in the sub-region, what's the lesson here for ECOWAS leaders?
I think, sometimes when I think about the situation, given the fact that some of the problems you have enunciated that are triggers for these military actions, I'm just beginning to wonder whether ECOWAS leaders would not, be honest with themselves and decide that time has come for them to set up, a committee to look into why these actions are occurring, not only in the states where coups have taken place, but all over the region, particularly West Africa, so that we have an idea of what's creating these problems. But I think that we really need to go further and find out not just what are the solutions to some of these problems or how Africa itself, particularly West Africa, can begin to address the problems that are creating opportunities for the military to want to get into government. You know, as I said before, the military cannot exonerate itself from some of this problem. So also the civilian governments that have been in place all these years. But time has really come for us to look deeper beyond all that to see whether actually it's an issue of poverty or issue of underdevelopment or the personal ambition and greediness of some elements in the military.
All right, then, Ambassador Joe Keshi, thank you so much for your thoughts on the program.
Thank you for me.
Moving on now, days after the release of the Sue Gray report on lockdown parties, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he would get on with the job of governing after another of his party's lawmakers said they plan to submit a letter of no confidence in his leadership. Mr. Johnson is facing calls to resign after weeks of a steady drip of reports alleging his aides and he himself had attended parties in his Downing Street office and residence at a time when millions of Britons were under COVID-19 lockdowns.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on his first point, I don't want to make heavy weather of this, but I am informed that in 2013, the Right Honourable Gentleman apologised and took full responsibility for what had happened on his watch. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that was the right thing to do. And Mr. Speaker, on what we're doing to tackle cost of living and taxation, Mr. Speaker, our COVID recovery plan is absolutely vital in helping people with the cost of living, lifting up universal credit payments, Mr. Speaker, by cutting the tax that people effectively pay, lifting the living wage, Mr. Speaker, helping councils with another £500 million for those who are facing particular hardship, Mr. Speaker. But what we're also doing, and this is absolutely vital, is increasing the number of high-wage, high-skill jobs in this country. 420,000 more on the payroll than there were before the pandemic began, because we've had the fastest exit from COVID of any European economy, Mr. Speaker, because we had the fastest vaccine and booster rollout.
Well, good things come in pairs, and couples getting married on 2/2/2022 should be off to an auspicious start. German couple Celine and Philip were still in the process when the February 2nd option came up. Though not superstitious, they say it doesn't hurt that they are unlikely to forget their wedding date. The groom, Philip Gay Lebeck, says now it won't be a problem remembering their anniversary every year. Wednesday 2nd is also a bonus wedding day for the newlyweds, as one of them's lucky number is the number 2. Well, it is a great wedding date. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shuboale. Bye for now.